For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2267 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2267, a bill to require the Attorney General to submit to the Congress a report that includes the demographic data of persons determined to be ineligible to purchase a firearm based on a background check performed by the National Instant Criminal Background Check System.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Ross, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material on H.R. 2267.
Without objection.
I yield myself as much time as I may consider.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, today we are bringing to the floor the NICS Data Reporting Act. It was inspired in the Judiciary Committee with a conversation that I had with the late Sheila Jackson Lee. I became aware of a problem with the NICS background check system because John Lott, who's an author, an economist, and statistician, author of many books, worked at the Department of Justice and has been privy to some of this data and had discovered that the NICS background check system doesn't work like we think it does, or may actually, in fact, have a racial prejudice built into it. That's a problem because the right to keep and bear arms, like all fundamental rights protected in the Constitution and given to us by God, should not be based on race, sex, or religion. The NICS system, that stands for National Instant Criminal Background Check System, is a program that it was instituted many years ago that you have to go through when you want to purchase a firearm. You fill out a form 4473 at the gun store, and you record some affirmations on there that you're not a felon, that you don't use drugs, and you also put on there your some demographic data. Well, the DOJ collects this data, but they've never let us see it. And I think we could learn some things and improve their system if we could see this data. Now, as soon as you fill out the form, they send it in to the central database and they check to see if you are a prohibited person. In other words, have you been convicted of a crime for which you could serve a year or more? Or have you been mentally adjudicated as defective according to this system? What happens when it does this check is the computers will look for phonetically similar names. And if you share a name, unfortunately, with somebody who is a criminal, even if you're not a convicted criminal yourself, you could be denied the purchase of a firearm. In fact, there have been 2 million denials since this system was put into place in the 80s. And in any given year, we've seen over 100,000 denials, but we know these are mostly false denials because there have only been 12 federal convictions in a year where there were 100,000 denials. And the problem is you can appeal this, and if it's your first appeal, you don't get it overridden, you have to employ lawyers. And now when you have to spend a lot of money to exercise a constitutional right, you're effectively being deprived of that right. And here's what we believe, that if you looked at the data, what you will find is that Black Americans are 3 times more likely to get a false denial in the NICS background check system, and that Hispanic Americans are twice as likely to get a false denial from the NICS background check system as a white American might be. Why is this? Because they share similar names, surnames, and first names within racial and ethnic groups. And so if you're in one of these groups and share one of these names with somebody who's been convicted, you can be deprived of the ability to purchase the gun. So this is a problem. We want to see the data, and that's the purpose of this bill. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2267, the NICS Data Reporting Act, which would require the Attorney General to submit an annual report to Congress providing demographic data about the individuals who receive denials from the National Instant criminal background check system, NICS, as part of an attempted firearm purchase in the preceding year. The NICS background system has processed more than 300 million checks since the FBI launched the system in 1998. NICS checks are critical to enforcing our laws that keep certain disqualified individuals from possessing a firearm. The overwhelming majority of NICS checks determine that a prospective purchaser may legally purchase a firearm, and these checks are typically completed in just a few minutes. But in some instances, a NICS search determines that a person may not legally purchase a firearm because the person is matched to a serious criminal conviction, a domestic violence restraining order, a dishonorable discharge from the armed services, a wanted persons list, or other disqualifying record. Since its inception, NICS has denied sales to more than 1.5 million transactions, keeping firearms out of the hands of dangerous people who should not have them. The sponsor of this legislation, Congressman Massie, has cited evidence suggesting that Black and Hispanic men may be more likely to experience false denials, since, due to over-incarceration, they are disproportionately likely to share a name with other Black or Hispanic men who are incarcerated. Mr. Massie has also expressed concern that erroneous NICS denials may disproportionately affect people based not just on race, ethnicity, and national origin, but also on sex, gender, age, disability, income, and English language proficiency. This is why his legislation asks for the demographic data of individuals denied firearms through NICS for each of the categories I just listed. There is absolutely no harm in seeking this information. We need data and facts to understand our complex world, to craft responsive legislation, and to determine how to allocate government funding. In fact, when I was in North Carolina representing people who had been wrongly stopped by law enforcement officials, we instituted a data collection system that looks into whether or not people have been detained based on their race or their gender. And it's been very effective. NICS is an essential tool that keeps guns out of dangerous people's hands. We should seek to learn more about how NICS is working and make improvements, if any are necessary. We need a universal violent criminal background check to close loopholes in current laws, like the internet loophole and the gun show loophole. I support this legislation, and I urge my Republican colleagues to stand with us in supporting public access to all information, including demographic data, so that we can be certain that our laws and our government are working for every American. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear about the purpose of the bill. It's not to collect more information on prospective gun buyers. It's to know what the information we have, what's been collected. What can we infer from those things? So, for instance, on the form, we already collect race and ethnicity. The purpose of this bill is not to tell us individual details about the people who purchased the guns. We want to know these numbers in the aggregate so that nobody's particular traits or names will be disclosed as gun owners. We just need to know what it looks like statistically. There's been a question from some of my conservative colleagues as to why the bill asks for both gender and sex. The reason for that is before 2016, the Form 4473 used to ask what your gender was, and after 2016, it asks what your sex is. So the language of the law doesn't suggest that those two things are different things. It just acknowledges that the data that's been collected over the years has been collected under two different terms, and we want to know all of the data. Imagine if a bank which also does background checks on its prospective tellers and employees of the banks. Imagine if a bank had an error in their system which caused Black tellers or Hispanic tellers to fail the background check more than white tellers or other bank employees. The bank would be sued out of existence. Yet we have a government system which we believe probably does this. And so that's why we need to know the data. And then my goal with this is that we improve the system, that we make it not sloppy, because what will the improvement yield? It will take out the racial bias in the system that exists right now, but it will also mean that all races, whether you're white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and whether you're a male or female, there will be no bias because we will check for your actual name and your actual birthday and clean this system up. And with that, I would like to reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
I have no more speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentlelady is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, this bill would require the Attorney General to provide demographic information about NICS denials. I support collecting data to better understand and evaluate the effectiveness of NICS and determine whether it needs to be strengthened in any way. In the memory of Sheila Jackson Lee, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I thank you, and I want to also thank Mr. Hank Johnson from Georgia, who's also a member of the Judiciary Committee, who in fact improved this bill before it came to the floor. We marked it up in Judiciary. He had a suggestion, and in order not to delay the bill or the passage of it through committee, I assured him that I would work with him before it came to the floor. A lot of times that's a euphemism and it never happens, but we did in fact insert the language from Hank Johnson's office directly into this bill, and not because I wanted to cut a deal, but because it actually made the bill better. We will find out not just the demographics of the denials, but also the demographics of the people who overturned their denials. And this is important too for improving the system. So with that, I urge passage of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 2267, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed without objection. The motion reconsidered is laid on the table.